My name is Hannah. I'm the Artist and Exhibition Manager for Uprise Art. I'm sitting here with Frezza and Terri Chiao, who are collaboratively known as CHIAOZZA. They're a Brooklyn-based artist duo. In their practice, they explore play and craft across a range of media. As you can see in this exhibition, we have some paintings on linen, some paper pulp sculptures. There's a larger installation of theirs, a sculpture that used to be an outdoor installation. So recent solo exhibitions have included Hashimoto Contemporary in New York, Heron Arts in San Francisco, the Wave Hill Sun and Roman Project Space in the Bronx, Owen James Gallery in New York, Long Island University in Brooklyn, Westchester Community College in Valhalla, Boquito in Los Angeles, and Vox Populi in Philadelphia, amongst others. They've installed public artworks in New York City parks, both in Central Park and Tappan Park in Staten Island, and at Industry City in Brooklyn, as well as many others across the US, including a 32 sculpture installation at Coachella. So just to start it off, I wanted to ask you guys, what was your overall concept for the show, Slow Growth? You have a couple of different bodies of work that came together and kind of were unified in the exhibition space. What was your thought process in kind of combining those pieces together?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all for coming here. So there are two series going on here. And one series is called Shrines to Nothingness. Those are the sculptural paper pulp works that were conceived of as a space for holding nothing. Our daughter, who's also here, her godmother kind of planted seeds about her longing in her life. She has a great art collection and is such a creative person, and is also moving miles a minute to get to do life, and wanted like an altar for nothing that she could just kind of project into as a healing moment, as a pause, as a space to hold on to nothing for a second so that she could breathe, let it go, and then move on. So these are our kind of response to that prompt in a way. Maybe you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah, the idea of this kind of like the shrine idea, I guess, stems a little bit from sometimes in homes where you have a shrine to ancestors, or you're paying homage to people that you respect and love, or other kinds of gods and things like that. And as a child, and I think a lot of us probably did this, but sometimes if you're playing outside somewhere, you just like start building little things that are in a way like when I think back, I feel like there may be these little shrines to nature, or shrines to the creek, or shrines to clovers in the summertime, shrines to nothing. And so there was this sort of idea that these objects could kind of hold space for nothing, and at the same time, that nothingness and that kind of infinite potential is everything. So they're a very sort of, I guess, personal, introspective type of piece, and they actually were made in, after spending some time at an artist residency that Uprise set up in Sonoma, California, at MacArthur Place, and we were kind of just spending a few days collecting little things that had fallen on the ground. And it's in wine country. It's a resort type of home situated like a hotel, and they have these beautiful gardens. And so they're just going along with Tobe collecting things and arranging them. And I think that sort of practice was very meditative and peaceful, and it's something that we really enjoy doing wherever we are. So I think this project sort of stems a little bit from those sorts of activities. I have physicalized in the sculptures on the wall, and you'll notice that a lot of them have these subtle glows where the surface on the tops of them have a sort of fluorescent color that bounce up onto the surface behind it. So that's also a little bit of like kind of animating the air, or giving showing something that's not really there, but you can perceive it, and I feel like that's a little bit of the feeling that we lead into these pieces with.
Yeah, and they shift throughout the day as light shifts. They're back painted with a fluorescent color, so it doesn't always work. So it's always an experiment too, like let's try this idea and then test it, and then, oh, it's not how you're doing it, and then we'll like turn away, and hours later be like, it's doing it, it's happening. So that subtlety of magic where it's like, is it gonna work?
Yeah, and like on this one, for instance, from my angle I can see that there's this yellow glow on the wall, and that's from the back being painted yellow, so we like the idea that even the shadows have color. And then these paintings are paintings on linen. It's acrylic wash. So they're a very high pigment paint that has a lot of color, and it doesn't have a lot of surface sheen, so we feel like there's no separation between the viewer and the perception of color, or the experience of color, because there's no reflections, there's not another layer that you're perceiving. And then there's also the raw linen, which we left as sort of a frame for the paintings. And the series kind of comes from, a lot of them are bouquet paintings, where from these collections, like, if we're going for a walk and we have a bouquet and you bring it in and you set it on a table, it could just be wildflowers or weeds or whatever, sticks, but somehow that kind of combination of shapes starts to work on our minds, and we also start to perceive the sort of flowy shapes as like the kind of flow of thoughts in and out. And they're not specific bouquets or anything, but we like the prompt of using this idea of a bouquet to sort of fill a page, to fill a rectangle. And so a lot of them you can kind of see, like especially the red one with the green background, we're really trying to use the idea of a bouquet to maximize the way that it sits on the page, and use the rectangle of the frame to play with how the shape then bends and turns. So it's sort of kind of a drawing and graphic experiment as well as a painting experience.
Yeah, then so historically we've collaborated on sculpture, because it's always felt like something we could kind of physically hold and pass. And I went to school for painting, and painting seems to have this weighted history of being an individual task. So then how to collaborate on paintings has been an interesting kind of challenge and exciting to make it work. So a lot of this imagery comes from sculptures we've made in the past, and then also viewing nature in different forms, grafted trees. We've spent some time on an apple orchard during early pandemic times, and just seeing the way nature comes together in these strange ways, using that as a leaping point. And then often in like small social settings, Terri will be doodling and still present, filling pages and turning pages and filling more pages. So a lot of these drawings come from game nights or conversation time, and at the end Terry's got like an amassment of beautiful imagery. If she's waiting for someone to arrive for dinner and they're late, it's like a potential new painting coming up. And then together we'll kind of look at this amassment and pluck our favorites and redraw those to find new shapes and reorganize the composition, scan or photograph, and then especially depending on timing, if we have all the time in the world, we'll mess and play. There are many paintings in the studio that aren't ready for the world because we're still failing on them. But to make things happen a little more effortlessly, we'll spend time in the computer and go back and forth with color. And sometimes our daughter's in there just like, I think the background should be this color. And like, oh, that's a good Tobe's in some of these. But we'll generally come up with the palette before we ever start painting. So that then we can, whoever's got free time, whoever has forged the time, can pick up a painting and just follow an almost paint by number that we created.
Yeah.
And then we can pass one painting back and forth. Some paintings I did all of it, and some paintings Terri did all of it. And it becomes a blurry line after that.
Yeah, and I think like the idea of slow growth, the name of the show, stems a lot from these practices that we do when we have a little time, if we're spending a weekend away from the city, or if we're like kind of in between times, like waiting or just hanging out, that speak a little bit about when life slows down and when you allow life to slow down, the things that you can see and that come to you. And then also slow growth sort of emerging from, we've been working together since 2011, so it's been 12 years of slowly growing this sort of language together. And you'll notice that a lot of the paintings, they sort of have these little plates that the bouquets are sitting on. And those plates sort of have dimension, and I think that a lot of that, in a way, is referencing our sculpture practice together, which is sort of really where we started, and we still think of ourselves primarily as sculptors. And so we've spent a long time developing a sculpture language that we've now, only in the last 3 years or so, started turning into like more flat paintings. And so that's been an interesting process also, where we're sort of growing from sculpture to painting, but sort of bringing some of that imagery that we've built up together with us. So even if I'm sketching the lines, it's like kind of, being informed by many years of us, like the way we've worked together.
For sure.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that you guys had said to me about, transition from sculpture to painting is that you don't have to consider gravity when you're considering the painting and constructing that painting. So some different compositional things can happen that couldn't necessarily be possible in the physical realm with sculpture.
Yes.
Yeah, like those levitating balls.
Yeah.
All of this imagery makes me so nervous to think about a sculpture of it. Like we would need some help. But we've learned a lot over the years when we take something that's, our first sculptures were 1-inch paper plants coming out of a little, paper vase with Sculpey inside. And then we used that imagery with like 8.5 by 11 seamless in our phones to propose ideas to the world. And once Wave Hill in the Bronx was like, yes, let's make this bigger. And immediately we start trying to do the same thing at a larger scale, and things are falling to the ground. We're like, this is going to take some new material. Yeah, so armature wire and wood, and we were talking on the way here, like, why did those hold up better? Like, we used a lot of hardware mesh, which is terrible on your hands and just like starts to cut you. So we try to stay away from it, but some of those things turned out to be the most strong. But yeah, the materiality and the gravity involved in sculpture. This painting sometimes feels like a spa.
Yeah.
In relation.
It does, and I think that's part of that idea of slowing down also for us. Like it's easy to get very overwhelmed with everything that's happening in the world, and it's the kind of carving the time and space to work on a painting is very peaceful, and it feels very healing. And we might still be talking and processing things as we're working, but the act of even just putting paint onto a canvas or onto a linen feels really nice. And it's nice to have these sort of compositions worked out where we're really actually filling in. So the painting process is sort of like flat, there's a lot of flat areas of color. And it's not so, the brushiness is not necessarily part of the language right now. But as we evolve, it's possible that might also start to change a little too.
Right. I feel like we're practicing painting. You think about that though, like an art practice. This is art. We're constantly practicing doing something, and luckily we get to do that a lot. So we have a lot of practice. But when we see that moment of like, ooh, that washy aspect looks really nice, and can we leave it yet? Are we ready for that? Can we do that to the whole painting? Can we control this? Can we help it all work? And sometimes we're not, we need slower, we need more time to grow there. So like allowing that space to learn and keep doing it and listen through the process. Is there information in here that we can use toward another version that we don't know, that we haven't envisioned? Yeah. So letting the process show us the envisions.
I think what's nice about that too is that you have the same sort of vocabulary of shapes that you reiterated in different ways throughout the different aspects of your practice, be it in sculpture, be it in a two-dimensional painting like these works. Having had the chance to sort of like develop this library of forms, do you feel like that you start to assign certain like personalities or names to the different shapes or different interactions of forms together?
Oh yeah, there's a whole, we could make like a whole scientific catalog about our sculpture shapes. It would be really fun actually. I feel like it would be a combination of big science or pseudoscience, New Age mysticism, what else, like toys and food and music vocabulary and just like and poetry, because it's all also about the sounds. I mean, Uprise Art often features these sculptures we have called lump nubbins, which are very small little sculptures you can hold in the palm of your hand, and each one is sort of like a unique small version of something like that, but maybe instead of this whole flowery thing at the top, it would just be a single sprout or something. And each of those, when we have our naming process, it's like just kind of stream of consciousness. We're spitting out things that the shape and color combination make us think about, and they each have their own names. And even the sculptures, like, is there the two paper pulp sculptures that are floating around? I think one is called the stick stump, which is the log shape with these little pieces that come up. And then the other one I think is called the ink pot.
That one's called the ink pot.
Yeah, which I think we also renamed the stink pot.
Stink pot.
Yeah. I don't remember why it changed the name.
Probably because I was behaving badly. Such a stink pot.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So these sort of like flowy shapes, these like kind of globular shapes I don't know where they come from. There's a whole taxonomy.
But then, I think we more and more are referencing past work for information, especially if there's a deadline or a time crunch, and we look to art history and peers, and like, what do we love about this? And like, oh, like the palette. We're not going to recreate this painting, but we can learn from its palette. And flipping through art books can inform, or even just magazines. And I think one of our favorite references is a turkey sandwich. It was like the most beautiful photograph of this turkey sandwich on the dumbest white bread and the simplest iceberg lettuce and the yellowest white mayonnaise with like a dollop on a doily of the man, like, and the way everything came together in this photograph was like, it was singing, like through the tightness of its palette. We're like, okay, that's inspiration. So then when we're spitballing back and forth about, maybe we'll sit in front of each painting and say a thing, toucan, or moonlit seaside swim with phosphorescence. Or, like come up with an idea and then help that be our torch guide through the decision, every decision. And sometimes it works great first try.
Yeah.
Like, there it is. And then other times like, we need to go deeper and read. You know, so sometimes even when we get to the painting, we try not to question any move until the whole thing is filled, because you're constant. All of these are back painted with a fluorescent yellow paint. So we start with like a super winding, our eyes are going wild as we're painting over that, because every color, you think, that was pink, but then I put it on here and it's green. Like it's flipped because the background is so intense. And sometimes we'll leave that line, like this little line in this shape.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough contrast inside, you know, we couldn't, how do you define that? So instead of, we're not painting that little line, that line is the background to the whole painting, and then we just leave it, let it be.
Did you have favorite pieces when these were leaving your studio, and did that change once you saw them hanging in the space and in relation to the other works?
I have a favorite piece.
Okay, I might.
Yeah,
I kind of love this blue corner. This is a slow life piece. So this is kind of a new series, and where this the title for the show comes from. Like, this history of still life painting, and the richness in there, and honestly, how a lot of artists, regardless of the bigger vision of that artist's work, still life painting is almost available for all of us, where we can all sit down and do a funny little sketch of our dining room table. So then still life painting as a history, and then slow life painting became a thing. Like, it doesn't have to be completely still, right? It can be, we can grow through this, and then slow growth came out of still life. Like, instead of trying to pause or freeze time, let's admit we're all dying. Or, you know, like we're moving something towards that.
Yeah.
So there's a dark, we tend to work with such vibrant, contrasting colors, and this one has a slightly more somber tone to it.
Yeah, that one changed a lot also over the work, probably
Right.
more than any of the others, color-wise.
And that was something where I planted the vision, and Terri did a lot of the color, and I was like, that's not what I think.
It was like, I think maybe you need to do the color.
Right. I'm like, yeah, we worked together. But what was your favorite?
I really love the one that's behind that, the red and green one. I think the composition is really fun because it really feels very full to me. And it also feels like kind of funky, which actually wasn't the prompt for that one. Let's just be like, okay, we had kind of named moods for all of them, and then this one was going to be funky. And I'm really glad that it was, because we were playing a lot. It was kind of inspired by Italian graphic design from the 60s and 70s, and sort of playing with like high contrast colors and that were a little bit garish, but somehow worked together harmoniously. And then I think it has some, maybe the fewest number of colors, maybe almost as for some of them, which is 13 colors. And so you see a lot of the colors where it's like one place and then it gets repeated somewhere else. And I feel like the colors, like the pink, for instance, you can kind of see how it like has this syncopation placement around the composition, and the forms of the leaf, the red leaves sort of meld with the forms of the green background. And for me, that it kind of has this really soothing flowiness, I guess, which I like. But it also, I don't know, it's like that is a favorite at the moment, but maybe it will change and maybe we'll explore new compositions.
And it's kind of a luxury to have walls that aren't our studio. I think of the gallery as an extension, like almost like it's when we get to look at it as if it's not our work. It's like, oh, like who? You kind of start to critique it a little, and I don't know how we've done that. But we did it. But this one, I think I started to see it in the studio, and then when I was in here, one of our friends, I was kind of like making fun of flexing on the beach. and it kind of feels like it's just got like all of its appendages are trying to like, show itself off a little. I kind of like that one. But then we didn't add that sun until it was hanging on the wall, and we're like, I think it needs a deep little sun to put this properly at the beach, and then that made us add this moon to this piece, which I feel like we listened to them after we made them, like that was a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I liked what Terri was saying too about the syncopation of like some of the fluorescent accents in these pieces. It really like moves your eye around, and then you have the linen border that kind of stops you at the edges. Since this is a New York by Design event, I wanted to ask you guys if you have any projects that you'd worked on with designers in the past that were some favorites.
We were talking about that on the way over here, because we kind of started our careers in the design world, like being part of Sight Unseen's crew and getting introduced to a lot of proper like designers making things that you can use. And part of our practice was working with these like lap joint wooden shelves that are inspired by an old Danish design that we've taken the language of and turned into more like a wall tapestry, a dimensional tapestry, playing with color. And I was talking to Dan before this, like these walls would be a different thing because they kind of want the white wall to bounce
these
off of.
pieces too.
Right. But we did some work for Google's new camp on Pier 57. And those are on gray walls, these floating neon shapes that I think the contrast really works. So maybe those can go on not white walls. But these collaborations, thinking about public art, and that's something we've done for a few years now, and they're like continually trying to figure out how. That we put a lot of paper outside, which we mix with waterproof wood glue, but it doesn't hold up to people. It holds up to weather, but not kicks and climbing and all of that. So a recent project in Houston, they took an old like mechanic shop that was in the center of downtown that was just dilapidated and ruined, and have turned it into a public space where there's a dog park and there's a grass space and there's lots of seating, a cafe, play space, and we were invited to do a little like sculpture play space off the cafe so adults could sit and enjoy a snack and their kids could run around and climb on funky shapes. So we created Whale Bone Dinner Party, it's called, and they're kind of just like loosely looks like maybe a whale fin, looks like a spine, of like a leg lump, or one of these stick stumps that you have, but with like filling the length of this room. And all made out of fiberglass, so when they do receive bangs, it can withstand that. And the materiality is something we're constantly asking questions and realizing we need to work with others. So I think the collaboration with organizations doing a call for public art has been such an amazing learning experience, where we started this project pre-pandemic, and then during pandemic we're all holed up and we're on a Zoom.
Everything's on pause.
Right. But we still are working behind the scenes, and we're Zooming to Houston, Texas from Vermont, and this designer, Wesley, is on Grasshopper, an extension of Rhino, and we're like, this shape needs to be just like a little, and he would just like use these sliders.
We would literally like draw shapes.
We're live sculpting like a guy.
Like draw shapes on Sharpie on a piece of paper and hold it up to the camera to see if he understood, and then he would kind of tweak stuff, and we'd be like, yeah, okay, a little. And it was so weird, but also that's what it took, because then those shapes were going to be 3D milled, and then forms would be taken of those to be made into fiberglass. And it worked out great, actually, like that, because I have a little bit of understanding of 3D modeling, but I wouldn't be able to do to that detail that everything has to be watertight, and it's like, it's perfect 3D model. So that was, that was a cool way to collaborate, which we hadn't done previously. And it is a little almost like this psychoanalysis, like people, like with Coachella too, where, so it's huge, it's like this huge field in the desert, so things have to be really big, maybe, to have an impact, and so there were some sculptures that were 40 feet tall, and we literally made, there was a designer, a 3D designer on the team who we called Adam, because his name was also Adam, but he worked on CAD, so I hope that was okay by him, but he essentially kind of just looked at photos of our past work and interpolated the Sharpie drawings we had done to help make the fabrication drawings for those things that a team of people who built houses had to then translate into that. So it's sort of like, it was very much working with the tools that were available, the skills that were available, the time, the labor, and the space that was available to make whatever could happen, could happen. And so that was also, I think it was very eye-opening for me, because I studied architecture and was kind of like at Columbia, where they were very 3D modeling and printing and milling forward and working with new technologies. And so to me, I was like, oh, this sculpture should be made in this beautiful waffle structure that's CNC milled. And we were like, that doesn't exist in the desert there. Like we've got these house builders that are not able to build houses right now because it's the off season, so we're going to employ them. And this is what they know how to use: stucco, lumber, plywood, and like straight cuts, and and it blasted concrete, and it was really cool to work with what was available.
And we kind of made our work more like that after that experience.
Thank you guys.